When board game give us more, we're rolling with more. Hi, I'm Will, and with me as always is the one who says, those spaceships clash with that space base.
Sarah.
And today we're reviewing an expansion. It's Cosmos Empire's Clash of
Culture Clash.
Culture Clash.
Yes.
Yes.
I know you want to say Clash of Cultures.
Yeah.
Makes a little more sense.
Well, as it is on BGG, it's Cosmos, Empires,
Culture Clash.
Culture Clash.
Yeah, you can't get it. You want to say Clash of Cultures. It's more impactful.
Yes.
To say Clash of Cultures.
But that's not how those cultures do it, I guess.
No, you have Culture Clash.
Anyway.
Anywho.
Tell us a bit about this expansion.
Okay, so the Culture Clash expansion adds a second build pool and 2 new mechanics, culture cards and the patrol ability. Culture cards provide players with asymmetric effects, and patrol allows players to reserve cards. And the game is also extended to a new point total to end the game. So let's go into a little more depth of each of those. So this new deck of build cards, it introduces a lot more complexity compared to the base game.
It's a whole new deck.
Yes.
And you shuffle that, and you keep that deck separate from the base game deck, which is actually an element I really, really like, because a lot of times when an expansion comes in and says, oh, here's more content, shuffle it together, and you're like, well, I'm lucky if I see any of the new content.
Right.
This one you're guaranteed, because instead of you shuffling and putting out 10 cards, you now shuffle and put out 6 cards from the base deck, shuffle the new deck, and put out 6 cards, so you have a total of 12 cards to look at.
So that expands what you can see, and you are, like you said, guaranteed to see new cards, so you have more opportunities and a better way to better opportunities to design what you want.
Yes.
And also, these new cards have crossover between the 3 factions. So a card might be 2 factions now
Instead of just one.
Which is interesting, because then when there's card effects that affect one of them, it affects this card. But then you have, like, let's say it's a biomech. You have one card that affects bio, one card that affects mech. Both those effects affect that card. Sorry, too many uses of the word effect.
Yeah, because one card could boost bio. Okay, this card is boosted. Well, this card makes it cheaper. Well, it's easier to afford too.
Yes.
That's awesome.
It is. It really is. So moving on to the culture cards. These are, like we said, asymmetric player abilities. You will get randomly 5 at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, just keep in mind that's different than what BGG says in their overview. It says you get 3.
I'm guessing that was the way it was probably playtesting.
Yeah, that was probably in the initial one, and so they finally settled on 5 cards.
And they haven't updated BGG, so definitely go by the rules. You get 5, and then as you play the game, you can play up to 2 of those 5.
Right.
Most of them. There was one card that said this pretty much has to be your only card, or it's nulled when you play another.
The second card.
Yeah. So we'll talk more
Your
about.
mileage may vary.
We'll talk more about our feelings about this mechanism in a little bit, but that's how it works. So these are various, I would call rule breaking. That's what usually asymmetric powers are. It gives you a unique thing that the other players don't have. Now, the patrol ability are on the new build cards. And if I got it right, there's really only 3 new card types, multiple copies of each card type, that have this patrol ability. So it's new, but not like the strongest mechanism. It basically allows you to reserve a card.
Yep.
So you can activate it. You take a card from one of the pools and you tuck it underneath your patrol card. Can only have 1 card under at a time, but now you can build that card anytime you have a build action going forward, and nobody else can build it. So that's pretty much how that works. And then, like we said, you now go to a higher production goal to lengthen the game to give you more time to experience all of it.
Oh, we should go back and say, when it comes to that second build deck, an action on your turn does change, the cycle action.
Oh, that's right.
So normally a cycle action was you get, if you spend one of your 2 actions, you get 2 money and do a cycle. Cycle would be discard a card, put it at the bottom, refresh. This one now, cycle is discard a card from the base deck, display and one from the expansion display. So you're discarding 2 cards to their respective decks and refilling.
Yes.
That's the major change.
That's true.
So you actually do see more even though the display is bigger.
Right. That's a good point. All right, let's talk about the 2-player experience. Unfortunately, it's more swingy. The build cards and the culture cards just, it feels like it can come out more randomly better for one player than the other. It's just like, it's again randomness.
Yes, sometimes the synergy just automatically builds itself.
Yeah.
Especially if you got dealt a really good hand of culture cards.
Right.
And just the right amount of special cards in the build roll came out and you managed to get
so for example, one of the games, Will had a culture card that made mechs cheaper. And he was first player. The beginning setup, almost every card out was a mech card. And so he was able to already have a discount on those mech cards. And so he just started the game with an advantage.
Yeah.
Just because it was random. Or like maybe you have something that makes bio cards stronger, but you never see any bio cards. So it just felt incredibly more swingy at the 2-player.
And I think it also, they recognize that it is swingy, which is why the end goal of production went up from 30 to 40.
The downside with that is it just feels like an incredibly longer game. I forgot to actually time it, but I feel like the game crept more to a 45-minute to hour game than the nice, tidy 15 to 20-minute game that the base is. That's a good and a bad thing depending on what you want out of the game. For me, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think they wanted enough time for things to develop, but at the same time, that just... There's so much more to think about when you give yourself that extra space. So like, okay, now I have umpteen amounts of free builds or extra cycles, or now I'm patrolling. It's like, oh wait, what was the card that I reserved? And
after a certain point, your turn takes a heck of a lot longer. So as much as we're complaining about the 2-player experience, I don't think I'd want to play this game with the expansion at higher player counts, especially if the game can still go up to 8.
Yeah.
With the expansion, the complexity in the cards just slows everything down. So I don't think that would make that any better.
Right.
All right, that's it for 2 players. Let's move on to accessibility. Unfortunately, the rules are just not as good or comprehensive as the base game rules. We were left with a lot of questions on how things worked. As much as they had clarification on the cards, it wasn't enough.
Well, that, and we also started seeing mistakes
in
the card text. Like you saw one, it's like, why is there an extra comma here? Because it's like something, comma.
Or there was one where it was 2 lines and the word at the end of the line was also at the beginning of the next line.
Yeah, it's like you do something with a card.
Yeah.
Why are there 2 A's?
So
A's in here.
There's errors where this was obviously not as well proofread, both the cards and the rules. And I'm not also sure if they fully play tested. Like, I don't know how to pronounce this, but this card selection, I don't know. It has a very interesting ability, but it's not really clear. So it basically eats other cards. You sack a card to it and you increase its strength, the production. The thing is, does it apply to, can you sack one card and all copies of it get better?
Because it says that when you sack a card, Seleshnid, the name gets better.
It doesn't say this card.
Is it for all Seleshnids, all players? Is it for just that one card? What is the goal here?
Right, and the fact that you have to sack a card that you own, you would think it would be the more powerful answer because that is a very costly thing to do.
Yeah.
So we weren't really sure, and that made us kind of not want to play with that card, but yet we did want to play with the card because, like, I only ever got 1 copy. No, I did get 2 copies.
Yes.
And you said, let's try it the more strong way.
Yeah.
I felt like I was cheating, but also at a certain point, Will grew his empire so big that he was still rivaling mine.
Yeah, I don't think you won that game.
I still didn't win that game, even though it was like I was sacking it and both of them were getting bigger. It's just that lack of clarity makes you really question what you're doing, and so it brings down the fun of it.
Yeah, and sadly, it doesn't look like the creators have much of a presence on BGG, so there have been other questions, and they're just not being touched.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but hopefully they get to them soon. I think we talked about this. It increases the complexity and lengthens the game, and that just might not be very accessible to people.
Right.
That's just it. So moving on, who this is for.
This sadly starts dropping off the casual and family gamers and puts it squarely more into the intermediate and up.
Yeah. It's going to be for those who want more complexity. Like, as much as I talked about in the base game video that I wanted more from this game, I'm not 100% sure that it was this. So it's going to be for those who want more complexity and a longer game. So really. All right, before we talk about how our rating may or may not have changed, let's talk about what we do and don't like about this. So the positives.
More variety.
We got more card variety.
Yes.
And that was something we really wanted out of the game.
Yeah, I also especially like how they operated the build, the build pools. I was definitely talking about being able to immediately from step one see and interact with an expansion directly and it not feel like it's limiting my choices.
Right, because there's other games where we've played with an expansion, you shuffle it in, and just for reviews, I shuffle the expansion cards into the top half of the deck so that we can experience them, so we can talk about them, but then that imbalances sometimes the distribution of those cards.
Yeah, I think...
it was Raising Robots.
Raising Robots, you did it.
With the pets.
And it's like, okay, now I'm seeing too much of this, and it's not working with the rest of the mechanisms because we're not seeing the rest of the mechanisms.
So the fact that they made them two separate decks that you can access from the beginning of the game really works well.
Yes.
Really like that. And the fact also that you can cycle a card from each pool so you can constantly move them around is also really great.
Yes. Patrol, I thought, was a nice mechanism. It's not the most important mechanism.
Right.
In fact, you really want to be moving the deck along. But if it comes down to it, it's nice having a reserve option in the game now.
I don't think I actually ever played with one. It just never worked out.
You finally got one, but you never looked at it because I don't think that was one extra thing you wanted to think about because the game's length expanded.
And that's where we're not so happy, is that the game got more complex in some not so good ways.
Yeah,
like complicated instead of complex.
Yeah, it let your system develop beyond the point of this is fun and easy to now this is fun and now I have to really think about it. Right. And not everybody thinks that is fun.
Right. It increased your comprehension load, and it also made the game longer, but I don't think necessarily in great ways. Also, really mixed is the culture cards. I don't think they made them balanced. On the other hand, I'm not sure if asymmetric abilities always need to be balanced.
Yeah, we did find an easy homebrew solution for this, though. Basically, we dealt each person 5 cards, and then we commenced a draft.
Yeah.
And that helped balance out any of the very, very swinginess and allow us to customize an asymmetric feel that fit with our playstyle.
You could have more chances to build a strategy around those cards because, yes, in your first 5 cards, certain ones are going to pop out as better, and you only get to keep one before you hand it over. I found that, generally speaking, within the first 2 drafts, I had the 2 cards I was going to use in the game, but it was nice to still have those options. Being able to see more cards meant that you had more ability to create a synergy between it and have 2 strong cards to be able to play a game.
Yeah, in fact, my first 2 drafts I thought was going to be my strategy, but as the game developed, I went to a backup strategy and then was able to use the 3rd card that I had picked up.
Yeah, for mine, I don't remember exactly what they did, but they were just so obvious. I played them on both cards on my first turn.
Yeah.
And it just, that set the stage for it. So thankfully, it's an easy fix. Keep with the 5 cards per player, but then do a draft.
Yeah.
And that made that well. Okay, so now, how did our rating actually change?
So the base game, you gave it a 5, I gave it a 6. How did the expansion change for you?
It didn't, because it's such a mixed bag for me. I was really hoping it would simply be a kind of more expansion. I mean, it is, but it added a complicated nature that I didn't want. I didn't want the game to go from a light, fun, fast game to a medium to almost heavy game in just the comprehension requirements and the length of the game. So it did add more, just not necessarily in the way I wanted. So now I'm at a point where I don't always want to play with the expansion.
Right.
And I was really hoping that it would just be going forward, you play with the expansion because that's the best experience.
Right.
It didn't make it 100% worse though, so I'm not going to drop my score either. It's just going to be one of those times where I actually think I'll more often want to play with the 2 build decks and just not play with the culture cards. Or maybe play with the culture cards but just play with the base deck. So I do kind of want to try at some point playing mixing it up as modules. But as is, I'm not going to want to always play with the full expansion, and there are going to still be times I just want to play the base game. So it stays a 5.
Okay. For me, it actually does go down to a 5. And I think the biggest factor is the time it takes.
Yeah, it does take a lot of time.
I like having more variety. I like having more thought, but I don't like always having to spend 3 times the amount of time just to play a game.
I swear our first one might have taken an hour. The first time we played with the expansion, it feels like it dragged.
Yeah.
A lot.
It's like things were moving, things were happening, but they weren't happening fast enough.
No, there were times where I felt like all I was doing was cycling cards to get money, and you only get 2 money. Because like beyond your initial stuff, the new cards cost a lot.
Yeah.
Because they have these really cool abilities. But some of those abilities are really specific.
Yeah. In fact, there was like one that sounds really great. It's like, after you build it, build another card. But it costs 7, and that is an extremely a lot of money.
Unless you got really
until near
lucky.
the very, very end.
Right, and unless you got really lucky and got one of the 0 or 1 cost cards in the pool with it, I don't think we ever built that card.
Right.
Well,
especially since there are other card abilities that can let you build the cheaper cards.
Yes.
A lot easier, a lot faster, a lot quicker. So that was just a weird card out there.
And that's why I still kind of feel like the expansion wasn't fully play tested, because I think these are things that could have been found through rigorous play testing. And I mean like blind play testing and people who've never played it before.
They don't feel dialed in as much as the original.
As the core game. Yeah, agreed. Okay, so unfortunately then it dropped to a 10 from 11.
Yeah, it took a little hit. It's not a bad expansion.
No.
I like the variety that it does add, but it's not as strong as the base game came out with, because it feels a little sloppy in spots.
I will say it might be one to pick up if you can get a bundle, because I mean that's one of the things we backed the Kickstarter, so it was a bundle. It was cheaper to buy them together through the Kickstarter, and hopefully moving forward they'll have them together. The good news is the expansion does fit very tightly into the base box. So you can still have it take up the same amount of room on your shelf in your library. So it could be one of those expansions to have around for when you do want to play it. But you also might be just fine with the base game if that's all you can get a hold of.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I was hoping that would be a little bit better, but oh well.
But I still definitely recommend playing the base game on Board Game Arena, because it is free to play. You don't need a paid subscription for it.
Yeah, agreed.
So check that out.
Yes.
And I have no questions for you, so we've been Rolling with More. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach out to us on the various social media platforms at
Rolling with 2, that's TWO. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Discord, we have a channel on Tabletop Express. Check the show notes for the invite link.
If you have time, check out the other content Nanaman has found for you, because remember, he's rolling with you.